Welcome back. I'm Tony Hewitt, and we're here at the Icon Award Critique sessions. I have the privilege of sitting next to Sanjay Jogia from the UK and Vanessa Joy from Austin, Texas, USA. So we have both sides of the world covered. We're looking at pre-wedding division. We're doing couple together non-wedding day, and we'll be doing bride or groom alone non-wedding day. I'd like to thank B&H for supporting and sponsoring this program that we're running. And over the last couple of days, we've been spending a bit of time looking at some incredible images that made the finals of the Icon Awards, whereas these sessions are designed to look at those that didn't make the finals or at least didn't even get an award. So every image that we'll look at has got below 80. The idea is that a wonderful couple here are going to have a chance to look at the images, break them down a bit, give you some ideas and some tips on how you could improve them, how you might approach the next time you have those opportunities to make images that are elevated and perhaps not so much just for awards, but just become better images overall for everybody. But before we go any further, let's say hello to our couple here. Yeah, there's a couple of you sitting here. I'm sure your partners would say no. Vanessa, you're first. Just tell us a bit about where you're from. What you do.
I am a wedding photographer from really New Jersey, New York area, but recently in Texas. And I have been photographing for 25 years. Enter my own print competitions, have judged them before. And anyone who's watching, I know it can be a little bit painful if yours comes up, but some of the most valuable information you're going to get, even if it's not your image, is from how other people see yours. So
thank you, Vanessa. Sanjay?
I'm still stuck on 25 years. Did you start when you were 2? Wow. Okay, I'm Sanjay Jogia from London, wedding and portrait photographer. I've been judging these competitions with you for a long time.
Thank you, Sanjay. It makes me feel young.
For a long time. Yeah, and I love doing this process. But yeah, weddings and portraits, mainly South Asian weddings. So quite large events,
yes.
Quite challenging, quite taxing, full of color, full of energy, huge demand on a real mixture of kind of photojournalism, but that beautifully crafted portraiture as well. So
yes.
I've had the pleasure and the honor of shooting alongside Vanessa, but it wasn't a wedding. Vanessa came to London last summer and we just shot for fun on a yacht in London on the river with a model.
As you do.
As you do. And it was just awesome fun. So have a look on our Instagram and on the YouTube. Is it on the YouTube yet? Yeah, so I'll be on there. No, so, yeah.
Awesome. Well, you guys have plenty to share. As I said, we're looking at the pre-wedding division here, and we're going to just have images out of the couple together non-wedding day and bride or groom alone non-wedding day. Now, if you're watching at home later or even now as we do this, you won't get every image that was didn't win an award. We're not looking at every single one. We've chosen certain representations of different types of shots, different types of styles, and we're going to see. We may get through 4 or 5. We might get through 10. We don't know. I want Vanessa and Sanjay to have the chance to talk as long as they need to, and then we'll move on to another one. So let's start with our first image. And let's start with ladies first. Vanessa.
all right, so this image has beautiful color in it, really. I mean, exposing for a sky like that can be extremely difficult, especially bringing in detail into the couple and your subject when it's backlit. Something that struck me off the bat, the second that came up, would be composition. So this is not following rule of thirds. We see the horizon line is going straight through not only the middle of the image, but also straight through heads. And that's something you want to avoid, as it's distracting, it's not particularly pleasing, but then also where they are situated, it's not like quite in the middle and not far enough over to be in maybe the left third. So when you have a situation like this, think about your composition, think about where you're placing the subject, think about what's going through the back of their heads and how you can make it a cleaner image that way.
I'm just going to touch on something that Vanessa said about the composition. Having it central or slightly off to the right allows us, it leads the eye in and around the image. At the moment, there's so much negative space on the right, and there's not an awful lot happening there to keep your eye there. So the center of interest is just off center. So if you are going to go off center, maybe think about doing it off center the other way toward the right. But this image has so much going for it. There has so much impact. Beautiful image, great colors. The two things I'd like to touch on are the posing and what seems to be an off-camera flash that maybe the groom is holding behind them. There's already the brightest light source in our solar system lighting that side of them up. So that flash isn't really doing anything for the image. And okay, it may create a little pool of light on the ground, but remember that our eyes are drawn to highlights. What we want to do is draw light to their faces. It would have made more sense to have an off-camera flash, maybe modified with a snoot or something like that, aimed at their faces. So that's where the center of interest is. It's the kiss. So use that flash for that rather than creating that separation. If there was no light behind them, it would make sense. But we already have this amazing light there. The second thing is the posing. So just softening the pose on the bride a little bit, just bending a knee, shifting the hip away from the camera as well. It just kind of softens the pose a little bit, lowers the shoulder, and the placement of her arms. You know, his arms are on the waist, but her arms are kind of locked and squeezed in between them. So that arm could actually come up around the shoulder just to embrace and pull him into the kiss a little bit more. And then you just turn the face toward the camera just a little bit, just to open up the expression so you can see their faces. So just a few little tweaks here and there can transform this entire image, and probably would have raised this to an 80 plus, right? So
I was going to go on.
It's always small adjustments here and there that make the difference.
I was just going to say that's one of the things that can seduce you with beautiful location, beautiful time of night. As someone who's shot weddings and shot landscapes, I can see the landscape in this. You could take the people out; it's a beautiful shot. Absolutely. And earlier this morning we had a similar type of image, and we're talking about making sure that even though you're seduced by the environment, that you still make sure the couple look the best they can be. So I'm glad you mentioned the posing as well. And it's about bringing those two sort of types of photography together, the environmental photograph and then the portrait of the couple, bringing them together in a way that's going to be complementary to the overall image.
And the thing is, you could take an image, break it down into lots of elements,
Yes.
And as judges, we kind of look at typically 10 or so elements. But it's not about just... What we have to remember is, considering those 10 elements doesn't mean you have 10 things that will make it great. Because when you work on those 10 things, there's a synergy that makes it greater than those 10 elements. And that's the thing that elevates an image from just being good to great.
Yes.
It's that synergy of those things.
Yeah.
But all it takes is subtlety and delicacy to kind of achieve these things. They don't have to be whopping, great, big gestures.
Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at another one. Vanessa?
This is something that we're met with at weddings all the time. We kill the lights in the room and we use window light because it's soft. It's a large light source. If there are curtains which are tied back, it just gives us that beautiful, elegant form that we can use. So the first thing I would say is taking a step back and using a longer lens, compressing the image, because then you eliminate the distortion, which is great, but it also means that when you take a step back, you have more of a chance of eliminating distractions. Like on the left-hand side of the window, there seems to be some sort of fitting on the wall. Now, stepping back and zooming in, if there is the space, and I understand sometimes there isn't, we'll just tighten the perspective. Effectively, you have a narrower tunnel that you're shooting on. And it will automatically deal with this. And so there's less retouching. It also gives you the opportunity to lower your angle, so you're showing less ground. The thing with ground is the carpets are usually not particularly attractive. So you end up having to darken the whole thing. Taking a step back, lowering your angle, basically makes the bride look grander, and you give yourself the chance to frame her within the curvature of the curtains a lot better. I'll stop there. I'll give it to Vanessa to pick up on other things.
Along the lines of what you were saying, I feel like it's missing that breathing room. Like it's just on the edge of that train. The edges, even on the either side of the window, it's congested. That's a good word for it, congested. So taking that step back, and sometimes you can't, and that's okay too. But in an image like this, where everything is very symmetrical, you do want to have that breathing room so you have things that lead you in towards it. And the part on the left, I feel like that could have been an easy retouch to keep the symmetry. But the posing I want to touch on for a minute because it is just, it's almost there. Now, she has a gorgeous hourglass figure. So even though I believe she's standing more flat-footed, it still flatters her. But it's the arms for me that are very stiff. They're extremely straight instead of creating more of an obtuse angle with the arm. That resembles a little bit more grace, a little bit more softness, and you can still keep the symmetry, but have just more elongated hands and fingers and arms, and maybe even just having her turn slightly one way or the other, just getting a hint of a face versus here, I can tell she's got her hair down, but there's no neck, there's no décolleté that I could potentially even see if we just turned her a little bit. You'd still keep the mystery, but it would become more interesting.
Do you find the image is maybe just a little heavy? I know it's a silhouette, but it just feels a little... I mean, we're talking about a beautiful woman in a nice dress, that's a high-key dress, but can you create something that doesn't look heavy even though it's a silhouette?
I don't mind the heaviness or the darkness even. It's the vignette that's making it seem heavy to me. And I believe that's in editing. So that looks like it was an editing choice versus maybe your camera or lens has a little bit of vignetting. But even if it did, that's something that could be reversed. What you choose to do in post-processing can make or break you. I would not have done a vignette. I would have cleaned up the line at the top or maybe even made the curtains come together to kind of complete that. And then what we said about the left side. Post-processing is a big, big part of all of what we do as choices we make as photographers.
Okay, let's have a look at another one.
Oh, this is a fun image. I'm not sure if that's water or sand, but it definitely right away just you're interested in what's happening. This flash technique, I like to tell photographers this is one of the easier flash techniques to start off with, just backlighting. Separates your subject from the background, definitely lights up the sand or the water, whatever there. But it is something that we need to be very careful of because it's extremely easy to overexpose it. And now we've created this straggly hair, which we definitely could touch up, and it's overexposed. So instead of it being subtle, now I have highlights in the sand that I can't recover and, could be edited out. I'll let you take the other.
So I'm just going to touch on the lighting as well, because the backlighting creates that shadow in the foreground, and that feels heavy. If you must use the backlighting technique, then it's the same feedback I'm going to give for this one as the previous one. Take a step back, several steps, in fact, many steps back, and use a much longer lens. 7200, almost against the ground. So basically your horizon line is right down here. What it's doing is it's lifting that sand up into the sky. That rim lighting separates them from the sky, but you also get the illuminated sand, but you also eliminate the shadow on the ground because the camera's in line with it. You don't see it. So for me, all of the sort of the messy sand is really distracting. My eyes just keep getting drawn to how uneven the sand is. But just by lowering your camera angle right down to there, and I would say triple, quadruple your distance between yourself and the subject with that sort of thing, and you transform the image completely. But again, like the other image, I think something like this, when you have such a symmetrical parallel pose, maybe having them in the center of the frame is better. And then keeping all that skyline in the background at the horizon line just adds that interest, and you have all that sky. And just that simple move would transform the image, I think.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get through a few more if we can. So let's go to the next one.
What a cool location. Similar things, really. It's so easy to be seduced by the location, isn't it? And just, you see a location, you think, this is stunning, this is beautiful. You're just taken by that. Let me just put the bride there and just grab a shot. And then you end up with just a shot rather than a great shot. So when you come, I always take time at a location just to stand back and absorb it. I just sit with the location and feel the place. And once I'm over it, then I get shooting, basically, because otherwise you end up with this overpowering excitement that you don't know what to do with. It's like a kid in a candy store. I want a bit of everything, and you end up with a mess, basically. Not that this is, but I think similar thing. Step back, use a longer lens, tighten the frame her maybe in the sky where you have that little valley in the background. So her head sort of rises above that rock that's kind of dead center above her head. And then maybe just adding a tiny kiss of flash. But the flash shouldn't be in the same direction as the camera. It needs to be in line with where she's looking. So off camera, she's looking off in this direction. The flash is coming from there. Yeah, I'll hand over to you.
The thing that I see here is a really missed opportunity to use this wind, because the photographer turned the model's head or bride's head towards the wind, probably to make sure the flyaways weren't hitting the face. But the wind is creating a unflattering pattern or position of the dress, when if the whole body was turned into the wind, we could have had a train flowing potentially in the back. The other thing is foot position or feet position here. She's very flat-footed, versus if we wanted to make this look a little bit more exploratory or whimsical, turning her, have your subject move a little bit, hold the dress around in that wind, rock from foot to foot, just something that's going to play into the environment. And then this is a beautiful location, but because the angle is so high, it seems small. You can make even a not so gorgeous location as this look better by lowering your camera angle, and it creates more of a grand feeling to where she is. Here, she looks smaller than the mountains, which she is. But when you lower the camera angle, those mountains come down, and now she's in charge of the area where she's standing. So just little subtle things that can really affect the emotion of the image.
Which do you prefer? Like, I look at an image like this, and I think I would prefer to use the longer lens, as Sanjay suggested, not just for that, but also if I go to a shallow depth of field, yes, it's an amazing location, and as a landscape person as well, I can appreciate that, but I want to bring that bride out. I want to make sure she is the key subject. So using a shallower depth of field on a longer lens, I still get the advantage of the location, but I make sure it's all about the bride without having to go to a wide shot and make sure she looks sort of dramatic and things like. If I don't want that drama, I just want that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Through the last 2 days during judging, we were talking about scale.
Yes.
Particularly in environmental situations, architectural situations, that sort of thing. And when you place people in an environment like this, landscape or an architectural environment, you're competing with it, and you're going to lose because it's all bigger.
Yes.
And it's the technique that you said that you use. You take a step back, you zoom in, and you compress the scale of everything. The image in my head always is that scene of Batman on a roof with standing in front of the moon.
Yes.
And he fills the moon. And the reason is because obviously the moon is bigger, but when you're standing way back with a super long lens, you're compressing that perspective into a narrower funnel.
Yeah.
And so you compress the comparative scales. So this is where the longer lenses come in, but also that depth of field creates the
separation,
the depth and the layering. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. All right, let's look at another one. Speaking of architecture, it'd be great to have an architect on the panel, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if only.
If only.
If only.
If only. Shall we tell them?
Do you want to give them some background on
Yes. You've done a bit in architecture, have you, Sanjay?
I qualified as an architect, so I spent 9 years training to be an architect and left it for photography. So,
well, how blessed
some
are
might
we?
call me crazy. Some might call me crazy, but yeah, I trained and practiced, and I grew up with photography. But the allure of this has just been far greater.
I'm just going to divert for a minute. How important is it, from both your perspectives, that we remember as photographers that our past lives, whatever they were, right, and the things we've done, everything you've done in your life when you're a photographer, all contributes to the way you take photos?
I believe that everything you do prepares you for the next thing.
Yeah.
And certainly for me with architecture, it has done. That's true. it was a bit of a fluke because part of my training was lighting engineering. Obviously, architecture is all about space and surface and texture and aesthetics and composition and beauty and the experience. It's just that the way I see it is it's just a different medium. But photography has a faster rate of obsolescence, and it allows you to kind of respond emotionally to your creative side much quicker than I could ever do as an architect. So yeah.
Can I just ask, Vanessa, can you think of something from your background that contributes to making you the unique type of photographer you are?
You know, I taught Spanish before this, so I'm not sure I could think of anything that would be helpful in a quality photography sense. But I taught children, so
But
when
that
I
would
work
contribute.
weddings,
Yeah.
I know how to get children to
There you go.
behave.
And the point I'm trying to make, I suppose, to the audience is you bring everything that you've done to that space. And one of the things all photographers are trying to do is they're all trying to stand out and be a little bit different. Well, the thing you can offer different to your potential clientele is the things that nobody else has done, and that's what you've done. So anyway, in this case, we have an urban environment and we have two photographers and an architect sitting in two chairs. Let's see what that comes up with.
With this photo, I mean, it's a great architectural piece. I'm having a hard time finding the couple. I mean, the light is there. I like the fact that the shadow is on the wall, but I'm wondering if this was taken in color and then a colored gel used on that light, that it would have created a little bit more separation. You know, maybe the sky could have been like more blue and then the colored gel would be a yellow to make it pop. But usually I'm a big fan of black and white, but right now the black and white is too muddied to be able to pull out that subject. And I don't particularly want to say, like, you know what, this subject coming down 2 more floors would have been great, because I don't know what the circumstances were. And then the other thing we want to do, especially with this, is make sure your lines are straight. The lines are not straight here. On the bottom, on the left, we see the edge is much closer to that light, and then it V's up. And the same thing on the other side. The other side's a little bit straighter, but when you're fine-tuning an image, that it's all about the geometry, we have to perfect that in the image.
I'm just wondering if this image is about the silhouette, about the shadow, or is it about the couple? If it's about the shadow, something was missed. And I think there was another opportunity there. And perhaps what could have happened was, listen, I get how this is. When you're working with a bride and groom and you have an idea, you need to execute it to see if it's going to work. Do it, and if it doesn't work, move on. Evolve the idea straight away and go on to the next thing. Perhaps what could have worked better then is to put the flash inside the window, okay? And then, because clearly you have access to that apartment or whatever it is to get the couple on the balcony. Put the flash in the window and light them through the window from the outside, so you actually illuminate that window without showing the flash, and you get to illuminate the couple too, but modify it with a grid or a snoot or something like that. So then the couple become the center of interest. At the moment, we have a competition between the couple, the shadow, and this vast architecture. I'm just touching on some of the things that Vanessa said about the lines. It's really, unless you have a tilt shift, it's difficult, you know, and unless you're, again, I don't know, half a mile away with a really long lens, you're never going to get the parallel lines, but we could do this in Photoshop. Just think about this. We have the kind of the springing point. So you've got the sort of the arrows of the corner of the building pointing upwards. Just align it a little bit. You kind of miss the apex of the top one, and you have the apex of the bottom one that's not really helping. But these kind of things help to lead the eye around the image. Use all of these mechanisms as much as possible. But I love the concept. I love that you've seen this. It seems very space age. I love all the vertical lights on the left-hand side. It does feel like a spacecraft, and it's kind of cool. But I think when it comes to lighting, everything has to be there for a reason. Think about the reason before you execute it. Why is it there? What's it doing? Is this going to achieve what I set out to achieve? And if it doesn't, rethink it. Or give it a go and then rethink it.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, Vanessa. Let's move on to another one.
This looks like somewhere in London. Looks very familiar. I like this. I mean, partially because it's got beautiful architecture and it looks like London. But again, I think there's going to be a repeating pattern here. Unless that extreme distortion, kind of sort of elongating her foot and the paving slabs, unless that was deliberate, same thing, take a step back and zoom in. That way you get to compress the difference between the foreground, the subject, and the elevation of the building as well. But I love the tonality here. You know, I love the color tone on the stone. It's that lovely softness, the little reflection in the window. Perhaps use those 3 arches on the left, or the one that's in the middle of the frame to frame the subject into. So you could actually place the subject's head within that window frame, lower your angle, so the top of her head is just below the arch of that window there. But yeah.
I mean, good job with the flash, and the tonality, like you said, looks really good. The positioning is what I would love to see better, because that whole left side is really well done. And then the right window, and then maybe that's the door there, become distracting. And because they're really lit differently, it's not illuminated in the way the other windows are, it almost becomes a black hole towards the right, where maybe taking 2 steps over to the left, or maybe going vertical, or maybe cropping it square, would have let me be more interested in our subject versus some negative space that isn't serving us on the right-hand side. And then very, very little nitpicky thing. I'm okay with her being in front of the brick or framed by the window, but the shoulder just hitting the corner, it's just distracting. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the posing a little bit here. Posing someone to kind of chill and be natural in an area is probably one of the most difficult things to do, because your subject is not necessarily a model, and you want them, especially when using flash, to turn their face towards the light. Just a couple little things that would help. Having her hands are actually posed nicely, but just a little bit lower, and in a position where she would be if she sat there and stopped for a moment. So maybe in a pocket, maybe one is down by her side. Maybe she would be futzing more with a piece of jewelry, something that you would actually do naturally. And then I would have had the other foot bent, because right now with the foot bent that's here, it's catching a highlight, and it's actually making that one leg appear more large and stiff than it really is, than if the other leg was bent and her hips were turned the other way. So because right now she's kind of turning too much in different directions, and it looks uncomfortable. So it's not helping that natural look that someone standing on the side of the street would have.
Yeah, I mean, just coming back to the posing there as well, that foot that she has up doesn't need to be that high up. It can actually just be the ball of the foot on the ground with a heel against the balustrade, right? And that whole thing would have actually shifted the stance. She would have been leaning less, but even just lowering the shoulder toward the light. So lowering the shoulder that's toward the light and then lifting the chin creates this wedge that kind of opens up the whole expression and the neck and the pose, and it beautifies that whole thing a lot more as well.
Awesome, guys. Look, let's do one more, and then we probably have our time up. What do you think, Vanessa?
I love perspectives that are just over the head. I'm not sure if this was drone or ladder or what, but it's always interesting. This is choosing an angle that we don't see when we're walking around every day is always going to make something interesting happen. The lighting here is the first thing that I would have chosen to just pinpoint a little bit more. Right now, what it's really lighting is the right-hand side of the grass. I want it to go right to this couple. It looks like it needs to maybe be raised a little bit, or throw a grid or a snoot on there, something that's going to only illuminate our subject versus becoming a distraction on the right-hand side. And then with posing, they're cuddled up. They're in the grass and snuggled in. I want to see in the red suit, I want to see that hand maybe on the woman on top, because when you're laying there and you're snuggled in, you're going to have all your hands wrapped around each other. So something that's a little bit more intimate. Right now, the the posing is a little bit distracting for me because on the left, you know, she is just so in there, and I love the way that her face is facing towards the light there. She's super soft and rested, and then our other subject is not matching that vibe. It's they're fighting with each other a little bit. And I do like, you know, having split lighting and maybe even looking, but again, the light has to be a little bit higher there. See how we're seeing that shadow below the eye? We don't want to see that shadow there. We want the light a little bit higher to get a split lighting look.
Yeah, just building on what Vanessa said, really. You could just about see his arm come up around her back, and it's lost in the shadows. So, I mean, I think you've said enough about the posing and the flash there, but I think just talking about the base exposure of the shot. The thing with flash, when you have it at a higher power, depending on how you set your camera up, you're going to essentially expose out ambient light, because you may have the camera just set so that the flash is doing all of the work. Set it to manual, create a base exposure, plate shot, get a sense of the exposure of everything else, just allow some detail so you don't have such heavy shadows and pockets of shadows, and then allow the flash to come in just to fill where you need. Exactly, just a little kiss of light. And as Vanessa said, shape the light, use a snoot, use a grid. If you don't have them, fire your flash through a lens backwards. I had to do that once. One of my assistants once forgot all my modifiers in the car, and we were half a mile away in the top of the tallest building in London, and you have to go through security, like airport security, to get there. So there's no time to go back to get the modifiers. So I had to get the assistant to literally hold the flash on the front end of a 7200, and the light fires out the back, and you end up with a funnel of light that kind of contains the light just where you want it to be. So we all have these modifiers, expensive modifiers, but they do the same thing because they're doing it in the camera the whole time. So have some fun with it.
Speaking of fun, have you ever used a groomsman's shirt or jacket as barn doors?
As bundles?
So,
Oh, the jacket.
yeah, so you've got the white shirt,
Yeah.
we've all held the flash and bounced it.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And if you've got your groomsmen and they're getting in the way, they're a pain in the butt. So you bring them in, tell them, I need all three of you there, so you can just hold the flash while you're shooting, bounce it. But I used to get the guy to hold his jacket, and you've got a set of barn doors. So he's holding, you get one of them holding the flash, and the other guy's got his jacket, and you say, in, hold that. Just turn to your right, there you go, don't move. You've got control of the groomsman without controlling him, and he thinks he's being useful, and he is.
I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of cool. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
And
Get
just
them involved.
One thing to add to here, again, coming back to couples or people in an environment, don't forget to look after the environment. And if you're seduced by the environment, don't forget to look after the people. In this case, we're focusing on the people. We've got a couple of those things that are stalks of grasses that are sticking in. So just remember that. Guys, you've been great. Fantastic. We've gone a little bit over. That's always good to give more than you expect. Sanjay, Vanessa, really appreciate your time, and you guys have got other things on over the next few days, I'm sure, as you'll see them wherever you are. Thanks again to B&H for supporting this program, which is the Icon Awards Critiques. Thanks to Critiq, that's Critiq without a U and without an E. Keep in mind, keep your eye out for the Icon Awards Collection book, which will give you some amazing inspiration. And if you ever wanted to, you could go on the Icon Awards website and you can get yourself one of these cool T-shirts. We'll be back in a little while. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks again to Vanessa. Thanks again to Sanjay.